Welcome to Financially Free Podcast with your host, Nay Torres. One of the reasons Nay could retire when he was 25 years old is because he was coached by the best. And now, through this podcast, so can you.
Welcome to the show. Today I'm talking to Veerle Berg in an episode that we are going to title, If You Cannot Buy One Property, Try Buying Two. Welcome to the show. Veerle, can you tell us a little bit about your path to financial freedom?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'll give a little introduction. I am Veerle. I'm 28 years old and from the Netherlands. I studied medicine and I started working at the age of 26. I was making 60-hour work weeks and started making some money. Then I decided that, I wanted to invest that money into something that would make sense for me. And right around that time, I met you. And then I realized that real estate was really a way to go, especially because I didn't have my own house yet. I was renting up till then. And I told you I'd seen a garage. And this is very funny because I'll quote this as one as the deal that I never got, or the house that I never got. So it is a motivational deal for me. I saw a garage in the city center of Utrecht and it had the possibilities of making an apartment out of it. So it was very cheaply priced because it was currently a garage. And I realized that when redesigning it, renovating it, it would be worth way more. And I told you this deal, it's really a good deal. And since then I was like, okay, so this is actually something I can do. Yeah. And from that period on, I started looking for houses that made sense for me to live in. And I prefer to have a house where I can live myself, but also have someone renting it inside the house. Have either a room or another apartment within the same property that I could rent out.
So what you found is that you bought your apartment and it's divided into two spaces, two floors. Basically.
Yeah, so it's basically upper house, which is quite common in Europe, that you enter the front door, you go up the stairs, and then you have two floors. And so both floors hold their own apartment, has their own kitchen, bathroom, living, bedroom, balcony. Yep.
So you made it work in such a way that you are renting the apartment number one, and that's how you can afford a mortgage. And you're technically living free today.
I'm technically living free.
And if you wanted, you could rent a second apartment and just go out and live in South American country very well.
Yeah, I could live wherever I wanted and live off the rent that I have.
So how was the path for you?
Can you rephrase that?
Sure. What was the difficulties you had to go through to get to the apartment? Because we made it sound like it was easy, and it was definitely like 6 to 8 months a week.
Yeah, it was a very hard time because next to working 60-hour work weeks, sometimes 70-hour work weeks, a lot has happened in my life that year. I lost a dear friendship. I got a boyfriend who was living on the other side of the world. I learned that my dad was diagnosed with ALS. Those were kind of things that were also very influential on my life right in that period of time.
So what happened then?
I decided that because all these things were happening, I didn't have a lot of time processing it. So I didn't have a lot of spare time. And I decided that working as a doctor was not going to work for me personally. So I had to find another way of making money so that I can make up more free time by working less, but still having enough income.
And one of the things I learned with you is that being a doctor is super difficult. It's super difficult because the way I see it is very competitive. It's not very well paid. Even though you guys have a very good salary, your taxes are super high. So say if you make 5,000 euros, you will actually be taking home
half. Yeah, half of it goes either to tax or social security. Yeah.
And rents are high here.
Yeah.
You don't get paid for a lot of extra hours.
Yeah.
Which is probably 30% more than a normal person does.
What a lot of people don't realize is that beside working the amount of 38 hours, which is in your contract, you're actually making more like 50, 60, or 70 hours a week. And sometimes you get those hours back in free time. But in my experience, a lot of the time, it was the way it was. And you were not going to get much of those hours back. And as a doctor just starting out, you're in a very dependent position because you're still looking for a training to get in training to something. So you're depending on those doctors, the specialists. So you cannot really complain or say too much about it because, yeah, you still have a training on the line.
Okay, so they justify the extra hours, the 30 hours extra per week, not paid, not even though you already graduated, as education, right?
Yeah.
Because what happens in medicine is that, yeah, you're a doctor after 8 years, or I don't know how long.
8 years.
8 years.
Yeah.
Okay. But you don't really make that much money until you get a specialization, probably another 2 years, right?
Depending, most are actually around 5 or 6 years here in the Netherlands. So here it's super competitive. There are so many, as how we call them, basic doctors. When you graduate, you have a basic degree. And so because there's so much competition, people have to do a lot of extracurricular things. So you are not going to get there with 1 year of clinical experience. No, you have to have clinical experience. You have to have a PhD, a lot of extracurricular stuff before you even get into training. And that's not even a guarantee. You're not even guaranteed to get into training if you've done all those things.
The way I see it is you get exploited for 12 years.
Yeah.
It is really true. If you think about it, you can probably be a plumber and make a better living the first 20 years of your career.
Yeah, maybe that's true.
I bet you it is.
Yeah.
Yes. But then you took this smart decision to start investing.
Yeah.
And you start investing when you don't have money. Let's say that's the first rule.
Yeah.
And so what's the first step?
So in real estate, you have to figure out, okay, I have this income. How much of a loan can I get from the bank?
First, you have to figure out how much you can afford.
Exactly.
Right? So there's 2 ways. You can get it yourself, or you have to raise money. It's that easy. That other people money can be the seller. Other people money can be somebody that's not using their credit. Others people money can be different things. Bridge financing, hard money lending, as they call it in the U.S. What do you do?
In my case, because I had a job as a doctor, I was able to get a loan at the bank. So I went to the bank and just to get an idea of how much loan I could get from them. And then once I knew that amount, I started looking around for properties that fit my criteria, that made sense.
What was the criteria?
The criteria was preferably in a city, not too far out of the city center, but most of all, I wanted it to be where I could have my space and have an area that I could rent out.
Perfect. So that's why we're calling this episode, if you cannot afford one property, try buying two.
Try buying two. Yeah, that's what I did.
Because you obviously could afford something twice as big as this, but you divided it in two so you can rent one part.
Yeah.
And now you're living rent-free, basically.
Yeah, I was very lucky because this property used to belong to the partner of a friend of mine, and they were selling it because they bought a different house. So after months of searching and not finding what I was looking for, or someone overbid me or other bumps on the road, I came across this house and I knew that they were going to sell it. And I was like, hey, wait a second, this is exactly what I'm searching. And so we started talking. I said, I want to buy this house. What is the price? And that was a little bit of a problem because the price they had in mind was higher than the mortgage I was initially able to get at the bank. So then I had to figure out where am I going to get that 20,000 restituted money from, because I didn't have that much savings. So I had to get it from somewhere. I asked friends, family. I couldn't get any money there. Then I looked into bridge financing, which is a short-term loan, but the interest rate is quite high. And I usually only do it in investment properties. And as this was a house that I was going to live in myself too, that was not an option. And in the end, I realized that I was almost going to make a promotion in terms of making a little bit more money at my job. So I started talking to my boss and I said, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. I need this little bit of extra. And I did a calculation prior that if I got that raise a little bit earlier, that I was able to afford this house. So that's what I did. I asked my boss, can you give me a raise 1-2 months earlier so I can afford this property? And we made an agreement for me to pay it back in a different way, but that made me able to buy this property. Yep.
Congratulations. Very good.
Yeah, thank you.
Wow. Okay. And what's the next step for you?
Next step for me is finding a new property, which is going to be an investment property. And from there, go on.
Nice. Very good.
Yeah.
And why do you think it's important to start working on this when you don't have all the money in the world in the bank and when you are actually just starting out with no credit, no money? What happened in your life that made you think that?
Yeah, so what I mentioned previously is that I had a rough year. year in which I basically didn't have time to spend with friends and family. I was only working, and when I came home, I was quite tired and not in the mood to meet a lot of friends anymore. So my social life really was getting a big hit in that. And then I decided I actually want to spend more time with friends and family, especially that my dad is diagnosed with ALS and we didn't know how much time he had left. So for me, it was very important to free up space and time, so that I could spend that time with friends and family, which is basically what life is all about, to enjoy life, not only work and get the money to live, but also enjoy life.
And I remember you warned your bosses in the hospital.
Yeah.
And you mentioned all these problems, needed more time, and they initially said yes, but then what happened?
Yeah, so I wasn't enjoying my job as much anymore because of all the problems I had in my private life, or all the problems, challenges, let's call it challenges. And so I wanted to free up a little bit more space, and I asked, can I have 1 day a week off, because this way I cannot function in the best way I want to. Initially they said yes, and then after 2 weeks they had apparently a meeting in their group, and they decided to let me go, even though I had all these things happening in my private life.
And you had excellent reviews too?
Yeah, they gave me a lot of great feedback. Yeah. They even said to colleagues, you can take an example of her. So it came out of nowhere for me. Yeah.
Hey, and I can tell you're a really worker. You will wake up at 6:30 and ride your bike in snow in the dark in Netherlands for half an hour to get to the hospital and come back, I guess, at 7.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So life is hard.
Life is hard.
Sometimes,
Yeah, sometimes it just
you have
kicks
to count
you
blessings,
down.
but you have to take care of your own financials because nobody else is going to do it. And
exactly. Nobody's going to do it for you. And in that way, I'm so happy that I have this property, which is split into 2, because now I live cheaper than I used to when I had a rental. And before I shared a home. So I was living with 2 other girls, and I was paying more rent than I'm now paying on my mortgage, because I have someone else renting the upper apartment, and that is paying mortgage.
Especially because right now rates are so low,
super low,
and the decades to pay it. So, for example, if I wanted to do this in Ecuador, it wouldn't cash flow.
Exactly.
And it doesn't always cash flow, by the way. So we are living in very interesting times.
Yeah.
Where pretty much everything cash flows. So take advantage of it,
Yeah,
right?
it's amazing. Yeah, and for me it's perfect, because at the moment I don't have a job. So for me, having someone covering those expenditures, it helps so much in making my life more relaxed, not having to worry about my financials all the time.
And now you have that peace of mind you needed to get your stuff together, socializing, all that.
Yeah.
Coronavirus happened, so
yeah, exactly. That happened. Yeah, so I had a lot of time at my new apartment, relaxing, working on some things that were put on hold for a long time. So that's really, really amazing. Yeah.
Well, congratulations. And I just want to take this end of the episode to explain a little bit more, and we have talked about this before. The reason you want an asset in your life is because financially you start existing. What happens with coronavirus, for example, is that the governments start printing money, as they call it, very, very fast. But what people doesn't realize that inflation, which is a political problem, it's not really an economic problem, it's a political problem, is transferring the wealth from the middle class to the government so they can redistribute it. And the way they do that is they just print more dollars or euros, and suddenly your euros in your pocket are not worth as much as they did before. When you have an asset, assets float. If prices go up, assets go up. Some go faster than others, but eventually in the long term that catches up.
Here in the Netherlands, you're paying around 40% in tax, and then also some social security. So at the end of the paycheck, you see about half of the money that you're supposed to earn, or actually you're earning a specific, but half of it goes to the government. But in rent, you're paying way less tax. So it's a perfect structure in which you can earn money and also pay less tax. So the amount that you're earning is actually really going into your bank account, something that you can use to go to a restaurant, to the bar, to do grocery shopping with, or to do anything with it what you want.
Yeah. And just to finalize that thought, financial life is a structure. Taxes is not fair, but it is fair from the point of view that you have access to them. You have the same laws as big corporations do. So if you take the time to educate yourself, you can take advantage of
The
the structures. And for example, a corporation pays 20% versus and
40% for a regular person having a regular job. Yeah.
Exactly. So thank you for your time, and see you on the next occasion.
Thank you.
Did you learn something today? How can you apply your insights? What's next for you? The fastest way to make things happen is to just share this podcast episode with more people that may find it valuable too. Talk about it with them and surround yourself with like-minded people. Hope you found this valuable. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.
This podcast references opinions and is for information purposes only, not intended to be investment advice. Seek a duly licensed professional for investment advice.